Hey, what's up, everybody? Kyle Buckland here in for Eric Rhoads while he's away this week. Today, my guest is Christopher Best. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, thanks for
Uh,
having me.
yeah, awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing today?
Yeah, I'm going to be taking a closer look at values and value studies and how they can help you as a roadmap for your painting and kind of get you a little further down the road in a specific direction.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. Let's get this show started.
Sounds good.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhoads. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhoads.
All right, what's up, everybody? Kyle Buckland in for Eric Rhoads this week. Today, our guest is Christopher Best, who's going to be showing us how to use value studies to enhance our composition and our paintings. But before we get started, let me tell you about today's prize. And this is very apropos, a pair of value specs. So we're talking about values today. So to get a chance to win these value specs, just put down in the comment where you're watching from. So all you have to do is just tell us where you're from, and we'll enter you in to win a pair of value specs. Last show's winner is Kim Moore from Kansas. Kim, you won an easel brush clip. So if you can send an email to asl@Streamline Publishing to claim your prize, that would be great. We also have a gift for everybody that's watching today. If you can download our free ebook, 201 Essential Plein Air Painting Tips, go to outdoorpainter.com/ebook to do that. And also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, Art School Live on YouTube, and follow at Eric Rhoads on Instagram. You can see more of our guest Chris's work at ChristopherBestFineArt.com. And don't forget to check out my website, KyleBuckland.com, to see more of my work and find out about upcoming workshops and events. So, all right, Chris, let's get started.
All right, sounds good. So what I'm going to be doing here is taking this little value study that I have. It's just using these Prismacolor markers, and they each have a numerical value associated with them. And I did this little study here, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about compressing your values to get a different effect than just copying the photograph when you're painting from photographs.
Mm-hmm.
This is a scene that I did when I was visiting Sweden with my family and of the family farm, and so this is a commission that I'm going to be painting, so I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, awesome.
So I'm just going to go ahead and already have the drawing in, and I'm just going to start blocking in. I usually start with my darks just because, that's pretty standard, but the canvas is already white, so starting with your darks gives you a good feel for where you're going to be going with it.
Can you tell us what colors you have on your palette, or what colors you started with? I know you remixed some colors, but what colors did you start with?
Yeah, so I actually have a limited palette right now. So I have kind of a take on the Zorn palette. So that's just going to be white, yellow ochre. This is vermilion red, and then this is ivory black. And then I've got this ultramarine down here. I'm going to try to cool things as much as possible with the black, because when I add white to it, it gives me a nice cool gray. And so I'm going to try to keep my colors fairly muted for a period of time, and then towards the end start to put in some notes that are a little bit more saturated. So I think it just gives you the opportunity for those colors, those subtle shifts to kind of happen, and don't need a whole lot of color when you're painting. I kind of liken it onto having a conversation where you got like a loud talker, and he's just, all the colors are talking all at once, and you're trying to understand what they're saying. But if you compress the values and the colors, sometimes just a little shift in color can go a long way.
Very true. I just want to point out to our viewers, if anybody was with us yesterday and the day before, so again, we're talking about adjusting reality to fit our needs as a painter. I think that's really important because every painter that we've had on this week has been talking about how they're making adjustments to the scene. And so, I think when we first start painting, it's easy to think that, well, we just have to copy what's out there, or that that's somehow our mission. But really, it's not all about that.
Yeah, that's right. And I really find that the fun part comes once you kind of get past thinking about trying to make something look like the object that it is, comes in like the arrangement and the creative choices that you get to make about where you want to play in the scale in terms of values, high or low, or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the plan for this value, if you look at this, these darker values are local to the tractor that I've got going on. And so I'm going to try to silhouette this tractor darker in value overall, and then have it read against an overall lighter background.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you look at the photograph, it's not actually totally like that, but it gives me that feeling of kind of bright sunlight that I'm looking for. Yeah, and I'm not really going, this is a red tractor, but I'm not going in with red right off the bat, I've got this dark color. I'm trying to establish the fact that the whole tractor is just going to be dark first before I start putting in colors that are more exact to where I'll be going with it. But, it is a red tractor, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, another thing, in that photograph, the tractor's not red, so that's funny too.
Yeah, it's easy to get enticed by those local colors, and everybody wants to put the colors in it right away. But really, what I hear you saying, and it's so important, is that we should be looking at values first, and really thinking about how dark or light do we need this area to be in comparison to other areas, right? So it becomes this dialogue between the different areas in the painting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this process is really helpful too when you've been, you can do these little studies from life as well with the markers to great things. You're outside, you're traveling, it's super handy because you might not have all your gear with you, but you want to block in an idea with these markers or write some notes and then go home and, paint them in the studio. I've always been very much the plein air painter. And so this was an awkward step for me at first, but then I came to kind of really realize the value of it, pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah, I always tell people, if you're going to paint in the studio, make sure you've spent some time outside. And so I think, probably starting outside and then ending up in the studio is a great thing, because you learn to see colors and think about colors, the way our eye sees it, not the way a camera sees it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I always find this interesting back and forth between like what you're looking at and where you want to go with it. You do need to really observe what you're looking at and try to understand what's actually, what am I looking at? And then also, like, what can I do with that if I know the parameters? I guess that's what I would look at this value study here, is like, those are my parameters that I'm setting for myself. And I can definitely drift out of that. There's not, as long as when I do this process with the values, I try to hold on to that as long as I can, and just kind of an act of faith. It looks good in black and white. I'm hoping it's going to hold when I, sometimes you can just make up the colors. That's if you get the value right. And that's kind of the one reason I'm using this limited palette, is I have things are already in a tight range of colors too. And so I find that it's a little bit more forgiving when it comes to working in the studio than, cadmiums and those very beautiful, intense colors that are a bit difficult to control when you're not looking at something, in my opinion,
Yeah, they can be a bit like riding a bucking bronco. You really have
to
that's
exactly right. Yeah, you got to hold on for life. It's a fun ride if you can handle it, but sometimes I got to rein it in. Okay, I got to get back on the fake bronco and ride that, the electric one. No, I mean, the palette is a palette. It's not fake, but it's I'm a fan of trying different things. So this is where I'm. All right, so I kind of blocked in that dark shape of the tractor. Like I'm not really focused on the nuance of it at all at this point, you know, because my goal is to just silhouette it against everything else and still have the effect of it being in light. I don't want to look like it's not in the painting, you know, so it's kind of this balancing act.
Right. I think that's important to note that you're using darks, but they're not black. You're not painting a hole in the canvas.
That's right. Yeah. And you'll be surprised, this next note I put on here, it's going to be probably lighter than you'd think for this eave under the building. You know, I mean, that's not what's in the photograph. It's but there's a bit of faith involved in knowing that I set up this structure already and I'm going to ride it, you know, see where it takes me.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, just killing that value down a little bit is going to help create a sense of atmosphere. Even though it's not a ton of depth there, you do want to exaggerate, you know, and create as much depth as you can in your painting if you're working with shallow space like that. So
yeah, that's right. There's not that throw, as you call it, you know, where you get that distance. I mean, there's this background area over here. I'm going to get a little distance there, but you're right. There's so much middle ground in this painting that having that extra shift in values to get a little distance or that feel that everything's not right up in your face, which is kind of a difficult thing to deal with if it's not done right, you know?
Yeah. So this is when squinting is really important. You know, I always tell everybody when I'm teaching, I say, squint down, you know, because there's just so much visual information out there. And when you squint until your eyes are almost closed, that's when you really start to see some of these big shapes, like the shape of the tractor that you've got.
Yeah.
Already. So,
yeah, that's right. That's because, you know, your eye can't handle actually, well, you know, we're not working with light, we're working with paint, right? So we only have that scale that's light and dark that's not nearly as extreme as actual light. So that's a great point. Yeah, so this note here, like if you notice, I've just painted all these notes the same, even though they're different in reality. Like this is going to be a shadow note on the ground, and this is going to be the bricks, and this is going to be on the side of the barn. But at the moment, I've just got it simply stated as kind of all the same value, just for the purposes of this painting, to kind of hold it all together in the simplest statement of values I can for as long as I can. And then I'm going to begin to tweak things and add some colors that will hopefully give that effect of the difference between those things. And I like to underpaint my skies usually. Underpaint them something warm, you know, typically, unless there's a good reason not to. It's kind of like...
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, go ahead.
We saw that yesterday. I was going to say with Ben Lucier was doing a demo, and he had a nice warm sky too. So it's great that we're kind of restating some of these lessons, because these are the things that really make, you know, if you have a blue sky, I see students go in straight with blue right off the bat sometimes, and it just gets too cold too fast. So having that warmth is a great idea.
Yeah, there's like I don't know if it's a quote or an idea, but it's one of those great art books, you know, that talks about if you really don't need much blue to make a blue sky, if you just, you know, a little flake of blue in the corner set within the right context lights the whole sky. Well, blue sky, you know. Yeah,
it's amazing how when you get that warmth down and then you just throw a little bit of cool. That might have been Emil Groupie that was talking about that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, I love the guy's work. All right, so I got my sky. I'm going to underpaint it in there. I'm just going to leave that underpainted for now because it's it's covered, you know, and I've got a lot of other ground to cover here. So I'll come back in and put some of that blue on a little bit later.
And that's a good value for that sky. I think, you know, I think it's important for people to realize what you're doing. You're paying close attention to the value relationships, and you're not so particular about color at this stage.
That's right. Yeah. Because I've changed the values, you know, to kind of get this effect that I was going for. So, like if you look at this, I mean, I had to make a couple compromises on, you know, I can't get that deep red barn. I could have gone after that, but I chose instead to get the effect of it just being lighter than everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm gonna have to make a little bit of a compromise that it's not, because later I'm gonna push this tractor red, and I didn't want it competing with the red barn, so I chose to just desaturate the red barn and get the effect that it's in light. And just those kind of choices are things that you might not make necessarily when you're just painting without some kind of a plan, which I love painting without a plan too. But, these value studies are really, I find they just push me in a different direction, which I think is, it's fun, to get that a fresh look or I think a lot of people we've been painting, it just gets, we all get stuck in our, well, this is the note for that, and this is the shape for that, and this relationship, I know how to make that. So
sometimes just shift materials can change the way you think about things. So, taking the markers out instead of the paint, and just having those, 12 values to work with, or 10 values.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really surprised by that, honestly. Painting for, I don't even know, over 10 years before I even thought about doing that. And I was surprised by how valuable that was.
Yeah, people, it's so easy to go, and I teach a lot, and I tell people, make sure you're drawing and get out your charcoal, get out, do some value drawings. And then it seems like oftentimes I go straight for the paint.
Oh, I know it. It looks so exciting. You're like, I just want to paint,
Yeah.
I think there's something when you're starting out to just jumping in and throwing yourself at painting and just being excited, and it's all new. And I think there's value to that too. So, but yeah, I know that feeling. Oh, I just want to, but I've noticed now that I won't, sometimes I'll just wait until I have a design that I'm really excited about painting. Especially if I'm painting the same scene that I've painted, 20 times before. It's like, I got to come out of this with a new angle.
Right.
To kind of keep that excitement alive, Because I think anytime you're just doing it the same way, it comes across as like, he's just clocking the hours,
Yeah, it's easy to kind of just fall back on some, tried and true things that we know work. So I think, like you're saying, just keeping it fresh and thinking about different ways of seeing things. I remember there was a point in my development as an artist where for a long time I was just trying to figure out, how do I do this? How do I paint this? How do I paint that? And then I realized you get to a point and it's like, okay, how do I want to paint this? You have different options.
Right.
Yeah.
You realize, wow, I have so many options, even with just one scene. Really
right.
Yeah.
I think it was Degas that said painting is easy when you don't know how, and hard when you do. I think that's what he was talking about.
Yeah, right. You just kind of, I know how to do the tree. It's a balloon. Just paint a balloon. I got it. Yep. So.
It's nice too. We're already starting to see some of the design come out. One thing I like about laying in some values early on is it allows you to kind of get a grasp on how your design's working out before you get too invested in the color.
Yeah, that's right. You could just say that all day long and it would just still be as important as the first time you said it.
Yeah. Yeah. I find a lot of these lessons, I still go back to like John Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting and reread it, for the 100th time. I'm still learning stuff.
It's true, man. Every time you pick it up, I'm like, how did I not see that before?
Yeah.
It's like right there in plain English and I just didn't get it,
Yep.
So you might be thinking like, well, not you, but you can see just how limited this range of colors are. They're not saturated. I'm just got yellow ochre pretty much with, how's he going to get grass? I don't see the grass. It's just like a yellow color. I can't promise it will be, the most saturated, intense, but I find, like green is a difficult color. Blue can easily over dominate. And I always heard, never use black, it's dead and lifeless. But then I looked at like Anders Zorn and his palette and some of those other people, and black was definitely on their palette. A lot of the illustrators use black. And if you just, I haven't touched the canvas with any blue at all. And these notes are it's just black and white to get a little bit of a light gray. And I think there's something true about that, because if you're painting from nature, the color of the sun is generally like an orange thing, which is like the complement to blue. And so it's hard to see and I know we see these blues out of nature. There it is. But when we paint it, for some reason, I go, that just doesn't look right. I need to put some orange in there or something, or tone it down, because there's something about that just using that black. And I have blue on my palette. I have ultramarine, and sometimes I'll switch that to a different like a phthalo blue green or something like that, just to get but yeah, I mean, I used to have warm and cool versions of all my primaries, and I think that's a wonderful thing to have. That having that range is just incredible. It's just, like we said, it's a little hard to control sometimes, and I find I wasn't necessarily looking at those subtle shifts when I had all that range to work with. And when I kind of started using the limited palette, I was able to, it forced me to have to look at the subtle shifts, because that's all I really got to work with.
Yeah. Great point.
That shift of warm and cool within one big shape, that before I might have just changed the value to get the effect, or just been a little sloppy with it. But it's fun to go back and forth and paint with those, that range as well. Again, once you've kind of been away from it for a while, you come back like, wow, I've got all this range, It's like it's like training with weights or something, or running with weights,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I call it the MacGyver effect. When you limit the tools that you have to work with, then you have to get creative. And so you end up learning stuff. And then you take those lessons with you back to the full toolbox of tools. And then all of a sudden it's like you have superpower.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy, MacGyver effect. So I'm actually pushing go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I was just agreeing. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying, I'm actually using the same color for that shadow in the Eva as I am for the barn that's in light, that's black, initially, because it's a close value to what I want. But I'll shift that later. But that's something I would have been like, always separate light and shadow, never paint, which is a good thing to do. Never paint them the same. But never say never, really.
Yeah, I think it takes a little, like you said, some planning and then some patience too, because it's where you're headed. As a painter, that's one thing we can do, is we get enough experience where we've painted enough paintings, and we say, okay, this like you said about the grass, it doesn't necessarily look like the grass right now, but you've got a plan. And so I always tell people, a lot of times when I'm teaching, I'll come up and someone will be working on a painting and they'll say, I'm not liking it, and then I have to remind them, well, you're not finished with it, you're only halfway through. And so,
I think every painting I've ever painted has gone through a phase where I really don't like it.
Yeah, it's
I can't think of anyone
like that.
Yeah,
when you paint like that, it just happens. I think you go through that awkward stage. But
yeah, it's awkward, right? There you go. But there's that faith where it's like, well, look, I got this drawing here. If I hold, that as long as I can, it is an act of faith. You're like, it's got to work.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of surprised it does. You're like, man, I actually pulled that off. I didn't think I was gonna, or whatever. But,
yeah. But if you look, I mean, already you're creating a sense of, of depth and atmosphere and space and design, and so you're already, checking off a lot of the boxes that create a successful painting. So I think of it, and I tell people too, it's like setting a stage. You got to set the stage, and then bring in the final notes at the end.
Yeah, bring in the main characters there. And, Yeah. Yeah, and that's where having a little range to work with at the end is nice, because like I could even pull out some of those more intense colors like cadmiums and just put little more intense versions like on the edges of where light and shadow would meet, and shapes and things like that that kind of have that effect of adding the effect of light without everything screaming at you.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was John Carlson that talked about in his book, Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. He talked about opera singers, and he says, the opera singer doesn't come out and hit the big note right off the bat. It wouldn't work. It's
That's right.
kind of subtle. You got to build to that crescendo. And so
that's such a great point too. I mean, we would all just kind of laugh if the first note was the highest thing, that you'd just be like, wow, what's going on?
Yeah.
Where are you going from here? I don't see it. Yeah.
And if they continue to scream, we might get up and leave.
Yeah. Right. It'd be so jarring and so just like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you were saying about all those cadmiums, sometimes less is more, and having all those neutral colors as a foil. And then when you pop in some saturated colors, they really sing.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So I've gotten everything kind of blocked in there. I'm going to fill in some of these white. I generally just fill in the white before I move on too much, Yeah,
get all the canvas covered.
Yeah. It's like sometimes, what do I do next? Well, I'll just kind of do what looks like it needs to be done next.
Yeah.
Yeah. Overthink it.
We're kind of at a good little, kind of a good spot now. And I want everybody to just take a look at that painting right now and just kind of hold that in your mind, because that's a great example of how to not overwork things in the beginning. So Chris has done a great job of just kind of taking each area and methodically thinking about, okay, what value does this area need to be in, what temperature. So we've got some temperature, thoughts about temperature, thoughts about values. And it's really, really looking great. So if you want to, we'll take a little break, and I want to talk a little bit about the convention that's coming up, and then we'll come back to you.
Wonderful.
All right. So if you haven't heard yet, Streamline has a 5-day plein air painting convention called the Plein Air Convention and Expo, with over 80 world-renowned artists that are coming as instructors. So this is a great event. If you haven't been, I highly recommend it. If you have been, then you know what I'm talking about. So I was there last year and the year before as an instructor, and I'll be there again this year. The 11th Plein Air Convention and Expo is going to be held in May from the 20th to the 24th. And this year, I'm so excited, it's going to be in the Great Smoky Mountains and Biltmore Estates. So not too far from my home. So this is a great event. There's a giant expo hall. So there's an art show where you can sell your art. There's a big party and all kinds of fun stuff to do. It reminds me of like a music festival where you have these different bands on different stages, because you really go from one stage to the next, and just all day long, starting in the morning to the evening. And then in the evening, we go out and we all paint together. Which is a lot of fun because there's just some great locations. So there's also some pre-convention workshops. We have 4 of them this year. So Joe Paquette is doing oils. Aaron Schur is going to be teaching pastels. Amit Kapoor, he's coming from India to do watercolor. And as usual, Carrie Curran will be doing the basics pre-convention workshop, where she's going to guide you through demos in all medium. And walk you through everything that you need to know about materials, easels, painting outside. It's a great opportunity for beginners. So I can't recommend this enough. It's just, being there as an instructor is a wonderful experience, because I get to see all these breakthrough moments that the students are having. I think when you get around so many different artists, it's just inevitable that your work is going to improve just by being there and absorbing all the lessons. So let's take a minute to just watch a little video about the convention. All right. Doesn't that look like fun? So if you're there, if you're coming this year, be sure to come and find me. I'm going to be doing a demo at the expo hall stage, and then I'll also be out in the field in the afternoons helping painters. So come up, introduce yourself. I'd love to work with you and to help you out with your artwork. So if you want to buy tickets, go to pleinairconvention.com for more information. And also, don't forget to check out my video, Courageous Color. I have a video through Streamline, Courageous Color. It's an excellent video on all about color and color mixing. You'll learn all kinds of great lessons. And then we also have in the not too distant future, we'll be releasing another video through PaintTube TV about design. So to order Courageous Color, go to painttube.tv/ASL. All right. Now let's get back to Chris and this awesome painting that he's working on.
Hey, all right. So I think now it's come time for me to express a little bit of color where I knew I wanted to spend it. Been saving that a little bit, and this tractor needs to be red. So just mixing up a little bit of that vermilion red with my yellow ochre. And I'm just going to describe some of these areas in the tractor that are in white, like the one thing I like, and I think you'll agree, is that those fresh marks that you put down and don't mess around with. And I think when you plan a little bit, it gives you a little bit of confidence to do that without second guessing your marks and being like, oh, is that really where that goes?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, having that. It's almost like a little roadmap for you to follow.
Yep. And just the order in which you put marks down also. You know, like I don't want to go in here and put in details in here until I lighten this value and make it a little bit more of the color that I'm looking to get. It's a bigger shape to smaller shape, and putting down marks that fit. Because if I put all the little marks in first, then I got to go back and try to color in between them, and that's a great way to mess up a painting.
Yeah, you got to lay that foundation first before you do the trim on the on the windows.
That's right. Yeah, but I know the temptation to jump in. That's the fun part,
Yeah.
Because then it all starts to kind of come together. But like you said.
Yeah. When I'm teaching, I tell people, have you ever tried to put the icing on the cake before you bake the cake? It doesn't work.
There you go, man. I can't think of a better analogy. That's pretty good.
You gotta wait. You gotta wait for the cake to come out of the oven. So,
it's not done yet.
And that patience is really paying off for you. It's looking great.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, we have a question from the audience. After laying down the initial tones, will the painting look different if you work wet on wet, or if you don't get to it till the next day? So I guess what they're asking is, so when you're working like this, do you work wet into wet, or would it be different if it set up a little bit the next day?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if I'm working large, then I will often lay it in without any marks first and let it dry, because I know that if I get into marks a little prematurely, so if I block it into this phase, you got putting paint on a little bit thicker here, because this is going to be all in one shot painting. But yeah, if I'm working larger, and especially in the studio, working larger, outside you can just kind of throw yourself at it and just try to get it done. But in the studio, I'm finding that if I let it dry overnight with the thin wash, it's great the next day usually, before I start to put those heavier marks on.
Okay.
So
what's your medium that you're using?
This is oil.
Just a thinner?
Oil with a thinner. This is just like Gamsol and Stand oil mix.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's drop this guy in. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
We're
about we got about 15, 20 minutes. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a little bit that's a little too light. That doesn't usually happen. Too light in this guy. So I actually just threw a little black in there. Let's see if we can get it to look. It's got a cool effect, but I do want it to go a little bit bluer, so I just put a little touch of ultramarine in there. A little more.
Yep. So we've got someone asking about your brushes that you're using, and also the board that you're painting on. Was it primed to start with?
Yeah, so the brushes are rosemary flats, most of them. I like kind of a combination. This is actually probably more of a flat filbert. I like having a couple that are small and thin, bigger sizes, longer bristles. I like longer bristle brushes, generally speaking, for landscape painting and that kind of a thing. So the rosemary brushes, natural. I think they're hog bristle.
Yeah, great brush.
And then the panel is just, a thick blick. I think it's probably just acrylic prime panel. That I use a lot of this for studies and stuff, and then I'll stretch a little bit better material for bigger paintings or make my own panels occasionally. But making panels is really it's a time-consuming endeavor. Yeah, I mean, I paint on a lot of boards, a lot of panels. Unless I'm going big, then obviously a canvas makes a lot more sense. So.
Great. It's funny. I get a lot of those questions too when I teach, and I understand that people want to know about the materials, and I understand that, because when you're first starting, especially too, you're really it's kind of like walking in the dark. You have to kind of figure out, okay, what do I need to do with this and this and but I often encourage my students to experiment too with different types of materials, because you might, find that one day something suits your needs, and the next day, depending on how you feel, you might like something better.
That's
something
right.
different. So.
Yeah. And amazing. Just the brush from, if you switch a brand of paint and all of a sudden you're like, what? What's wrong? Just slightly different equation. But I'm kind of the kind of person that I try to buy the best materials I can within reason, but I'm not afraid to use materials that are not the best. If it's going to help me continue to work and develop and not be afraid of using materials, just squirting it out there or just covering the canvas. And I don't, fear, I think, is really a bigger problem than, because I think on average, most materials are probably okay. I have found that canvases are where you probably want to spend more attention. I don't know what you think about that, Kyle, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think the surface can be discouraging if it's too cheap, too absorbent.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so that can cause you to second guess yourself when you're first starting, and people might think it's their skill set when actually it's just the inferior materials. So yeah, I think like you said, within reason. I think you don't have to go out and buy the most expensive stuff, but you do want something that's decent and archival, which most of it is.
Yeah. Mostly, I think most paints are pretty good, but I think the surfaces are really where I find that there's a lot of variation with things are drying flat or they're not looking right. So.
That tractor is really popping now. I just wanted to comment a little bit on how that patience paid off for you, because when you first laid it in, it seemed very flat, which is good. That's what we want in the beginning. We want big flat shapes, and now with just a little bit of effort and a lot of thought behind that effort, the tractor is just really coming to life.
Good. Yeah, thanks. That's that's kind of that faith thing, you just you do it, it doesn't look like much now, but I'm looking down the road,
Yep. And I always tell people, you get there, it's inevitable. You just have to keep painting. It's it's in the process. It's in falling in love with the process and wanting to. People ask me, what's my favorite painting? I say, the next one.
Yeah, the one I dreamt about, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So just little shifts up here from slightly darker and warmer. I do want to have the expression of like that warm kicking up into the eave there, and then a little bit of yellow, and start to differentiate between like this shape or that color, this color, all the same right now. Even that background color is the same, but try to put a little bit of shift of colors that temperature and stuff. You know, and I want to try to hold that value pattern as long as I can until I feel like it's just needs to step out into those like I call them, I guess, like secondary or values or something like that, where, or you could call them colors either way, but where they weren't part of the original big design, but then now it's time to put them in and kind of complete the you know.
Yeah, just kind of slightly darker, slightly lighter than the value that you've set down
Yeah,
initially.
correct.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Or slightly cooler, you know.
right, yeah,
Or sometimes
yeah. The
much
same
cooler.
value.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
same value,
exactly.
but a different temperature. Yep.
Yep, exactly. And so, and I think that like it was I think it was Howard Pyle, the illustrator, who said that variety is property of the lights.
Mm-hmm.
So shifting colors while holding the value within lights it's going to give you the effect of sunlight, regardless of whether you have like intense chromatic shifts or whether it's just like little subtle, you know, cooling and warming
Mm-hmm.
within this whole shadow or this whole light shape here, you know.
Yeah, and a great example of that is NC Wyeth, who was a student of Howard Pyle. It's funny because sometimes you can see the lessons of the teacher more exemplified in the students than in the
Oh
teachers
yeah.
themselves. And so if
Yeah.
you look at, you know, the light areas in NC Wyeth's paintings, like the skies in his illustrations, just so much variety in temperature, but using the value to hold together the designs.
Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely want to emphasize the fact that this isn't like one way to do everything, but this is a way to do it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm kind of at right now. But I do love a good saturated painting as well. Let's see. And then I can think also like I could put in a couple darker value shifts like in the ground plane that would help describe perspective a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like on the ground plane, just take my ground color and put in like a linear element that
Yeah, very effective.
will kind of lead you. I don't want to lead you off the painting, but this is so strong it will lead you back in, I think. But
Mm-hmm.
some little slightly darker notes that darker or more intense in color or both, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always surprised how few of those, like I guess, secondary colors or notes that you need if you get them, if you get them right or put them in the right place, you know, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's so important, and I think I'll point out too, just so people can understand this. So you know, instead of thinking how can I make this grass look like grass, you're thinking what brush strokes do I need in the grass to move the viewer's eye around my composition and my design. So that's
Yeah.
thinking like a paint. That's thinking my painter. So yeah, that's really interesting to think about that difference, because I think we get so caught up with how do I make a tree, how do I make grass, that we forget about, you know, what the real thing is. We want to design our painting to engage the viewer.
Yeah, and I think that's really where the fun really happens when you think that way. You know, you realize within reason you have a lot of room to try different things, you know, and not be. Yeah. And as long as I make the background look like it's in light, you know, and that light and shadow, you know, is looking truthful, I don't really care what actually color the barn is, you know. You know, within reason, unless that's something I'm really, you know, excited about. But you know, obviously here I push the red down so much that now I'm going to put in a couple notes of red on the barn just to kind of. I'm thinking that like marks that I think would be kind of interesting in the painting, you know, because they're just going to be linear little flicks and dots and dabs. That's the fun part to me, like, you know. Those are a little dark, maybe some of them. I could put a cooler version of that in the same, maybe even a little bit of cooler blue in there just to hold that value, but shift it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's created a nice vibration sheen on that. So important for people to understand that value when you have two different temperatures that are very close in value. That's how you create color vibration. And so we can see that in the road, we can see that in the barn. You know, a lot of areas of your painting are starting to really vibrate now with atmosphere.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a great point, Kyle, because that was lost on me too, and I was just like, well, you know, so but working within that tight range of the Zorn palette really kind of helped me to come to terms with what you're talking about, and that those color vibrations, you know, there's so many different ways there's a couple different ways you can get them, like underpaintings and things like that, you know. Or then hold the value, change the color, you know, within a big shape. I'm just cooling this background a little bit. I want to get that to recede a little bit.
That's looking great. This is a great example of how a lot of thinking can save you a lot of work when you're painting, because we are witnessing this painting in the last 45 minutes just completely come to life from a drawing. And you know, you made it look very easy, but I know from experience that's almost an illusion, because what's actually happening is a lot of work going on behind the scenes, right, in your mind when you're planning things out.
Yeah, that's true, and that's a great point, because to me it makes the painting process more fun when I go in to paint it, when I've tried to get as many of those problems out of the way before I pick up my brush, and so then I really start to enjoy the process more. Doesn't mean that you won't come across, you know, a problem or something, but
So we got about 2 or 3 minutes left. So if there's anything is there anything you could think of that you kind of want everybody to take away from this, or anything you haven't said yet that you want to say?
I would say don't be afraid of planning. Don't be afraid of doing other things that will make you a better painter, such as printmaking, drawing, not working in color, grayscale, anything, cutting out pieces of paper and putting them together to come up with a fun design that you then get excited about painting. I think that's really so important, is to be excited about it when you actually step in to do it.
Yeah, great advice. I think it's easy for us to just kind of get comfortable with doing one thing, and you know, we find something that comes easy to us, and then we forget to push ourselves. But you know, in the beginning, pushing ourselves is what made everything interesting, and so you certainly don't want to lose that in the journey.
Yeah, and the planning is definitely not something that stymies creativity. I think there's so much room for spontaneity within the plan that yeah.
I tell people it's like going on a road trip, and it's like if you don't have any direction, that can be a little nerve-wracking, because you're like, oh, we might get lost, or we don't know if we have enough gas. And the same thing is if you plan out everything too meticulously, then you don't leave any room for surprises. So it's kind of that halfway of like, you want a roadmap, but you don't want to plan out everything too meticulously, because you want to make some discoveries along the way too.
That's absolutely it. Yeah, and that's kind of the microcosm of life, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. There's all kinds of analogies with art. Yeah, art and life. I think they kind of parallel each other a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's looking really, really nice. It's amazing. I enjoy being kind of on the other side of things and getting to watch these paintings come to life. I'm learning a lot too. So I know our viewers are learning.
Yeah, man. It's always, you know, learning is just what it's all about. We're all trying to learn.
Yep. So, all right. Well, that's awesome. If you want, we'll bring you back on camera for just a second, and I want to thank you so much for being here. So we can. Yeah. Awesome. Well, a great job today, and I think everybody really probably learned a lot from this. This was a great demo, and I really enjoyed having you.
Great, Kyle. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Chris. All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that demo. I think Chris did a great job. Lots of things to think about, how planning out your values can solve a lot of problems down the line. So taking some time to plan out your painting, and then also reserve. Notice how he didn't go in with a lot of bright colors right off the bat. So keeping things toned down, keeping your values simple, keeping your colors simple at first gives you some room to play near the end of your painting. So thanks so much for joining me again today. I will be here all week while Eric is away. So be sure to tune in tomorrow for another awesome demo.